Wargamers. In my last video, I talked a little bit about how we didn't have a good idea of what the specialist roles in the new kill team are going to be. We had some general idea of, you know, this is what that does and this is what that does, but we didn't have a comprehensive list of all the specialist roles and their talent trees and everything like that. So that left my last video a little bit lacking, but good news. Recently we got a post from Fate212 doing exactly that. So we have a complete list of all the different specialist roles, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what those different specialist roles are, their perks, and then what types of units might actually want to use them. Then at the end I'll go into a little bit more detail about the Tau specific kill team members and which types of roles they might want to take. So if you're here just for the general stuff, we're doing that up front. If you're here for Tau stuff, stick through to the end and we'll get to that. So before we do any of that though, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead, hit like and subscribe. That way you don't miss any of my upcoming kill team or Tau content. So like I said, this is from Fate212. It's a rumor or a leak or however you want to think about that, but I don't have the actual kill team rulebook yet. So my opinions on whether these things are good or bad or useful or unuseful is probably going to change once I actually get the rulebook, but I think I have a general idea of the value of these different traits just based on, you know, 40K. A lot of the rules are similar to 40K, and so, you know, things that affect shooting, probably good for things that are shooting, right? Things that affect close combat, probably good for close combat units. Things that affect movement, you know, you get the idea. So that type of intuition is going to be how I'm judging these things. And again, I'm using the preface that there are a limit to the number of specialists that you have in a kill team. You have 3 specialists, and those can't be redundant. So you can't have like 3 snipers. You can have 3 different specialists, but not of the same role. So without any further ado, let's jump into the different specializations and talk about how you might want to use them. All right, so starting with leaders, their baseline benefit is that they give you +1 command point every turn, and then you can build them to either be kind of buff-centric, kind of doing a pure type engram neurochip type thing where you're able to recoup command points, or you can make them be nerve test based, where they're affecting how nerve tests actually play out. And I think this is basically a staple unit. You're going to want to bring leader pretty much all the time, and yeah, so there's not really that much to say about it because it's going to be a unit that you bring in most lists, and you're going to build it out depending on how your campaign goes. But again, that's important to remember, is that these elevated benefits are really only going to be happening in campaign type situations. If you're starting off for just like a pickup game of kill team, you're not going to have access to these higher tier talents, and so you're really just looking at that baseline perk of +1 command point. And so that's kind of, there's 2 different sets of games that we're talking about here. We're talking about just a pickup game, and then we're also talking about campaigns, and whether or not a role is useful is going to be different based on which type of environment you're in. Communications give +1 a hit for 1 model within 6 inches of the specialist, and then you can build it to be either command point focused or debuff focused. And this again is going to be a pretty common unit. It's a good support. It's going to make your other units perform a lot better, and so having them in a list I think is going to be pretty typical. The next 2 specialists, the heavy and combat specialists, I think are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. The heavy allows you to ignore movement penalties to hit, and you can build it to either be a heavy hitter or more tanky, so you can basically improve their output or increase their durability. I think this is a really good choice for things that are heavy shooters that have some sort of heavy weapon, you know, hence the name heavy, but also things like breachers that you know, would benefit from an advance and shoot ability. Granted, breachers don't have the option to be heavy specialists, but things that have assault weapons, this is a nice talent for them as well. But it could also be good for things that are taking on multiple roles or kind of a jack of all trade type things. It doesn't have to be a shooting unit. Things that are close combat specialists, if they've already used up some of these other traits like combat and zealot, then being a heavy specialist for a close combat oriented unit is not a bad third choice. On that note, the combat specialist gets +1 attack, never a bad thing, and then you can build it to either do more damage or be more consistent in that damage. So either, you know, have that damage be more severe, or you can just kind of mitigate the variability in the dice a little bit. And then this is basically just the assault version of the heavy trait. And so if you're playing a close combat army, you're probably going to take one of these guys. Demolitionists have a +1 to wound against targets that are obscured, and you can build them to either manipulate resources in the campaign setting or do more damage. This is pretty specialized depending on the weapon. For example, if you're taking a flamer, this is a really good choice, but if you're, you know, bringing like you know, a bolter, probably not the best choice. So you know, depending on the weapon loadout, this can be a really good choice. It can also be a really nice backup for a sniper. So if you've already used your sniper role, you can go with the demolition person to basically take out obscure targets. That's one of the big things with Kill Team, is that there's supposed to be a really high density of terrain, and so there's probably going to be a lot of obscure targets, and so having that ability to add one to your wound roll against them, probably going to pop up more often than you think. The medic is one that I'm not really sold on yet. Maybe that's going to change when I get the actual rulebook in my hand, but right now it seems kind of situational and not really that valuable compared to some of these other choices. But what it does is it makes that model not be treated as shaken for nerve tests across your kill team, and then it can also be built to either be kind of a beneficial character or a detrimental character to your enemy. Basically, the medic can giveth and the medic can taketh away. I think this is probably pretty good for low model count armies in a campaign setting, but I'm not seeing the generalist appeal of the medic, which is kind of surprising because I would think that the medic would be one of the staple units, but maybe it's not. Scouts are allowed to re-roll their advanced rolls, so if you're a assault weapon wielding character and you're going to be doing a lot of advancing, then this is probably not a bad choice for you. And it can be built to either improve its effectiveness or manipulate board or campaign control. And so this can be really valuable in campaigns, but otherwise I'd probably take heavy if that's an option. Scouting could be good, but I think that the heavy trait is better if you have an assault weapon. And if you're able to take heavy. Snipers reroll ones to hit, and then they can be built to either improve their stats or increase their output. And this is going to be great for things that aren't moving around a whole lot. Otherwise, you're going to need the higher level traits to allow you to move and shoot. So things that are going to be not moving around very much, things that are really going to be snipers, this is a good trait for. But if you're just a regular shooty guy and you don't really have a clear role for them as being a stationary gun platform, there might be other choices that you want to look at. The veteran ignores leadership penalties, which makes sense. You know, the veteran's been through a bunch of battles, they're used to it, so they don't suffer these leadership penalties. And you can build them to either be a stronger individual or be more of a buff debuff character. So they can either make themselves better or make other people around them better, which I think is kind of a cool bit of flavor when you think about, you know, the role of the veteran in the kill team. And this is probably going to be really good for campaigns because of those higher level traits. Those higher level traits are going to be really useful, but if you're just playing a pickup game, you only have access to that primary tier. It's probably not going to be that useful. You're going to want to go with things that are more aggressive or somehow more directly beneficial to a larger portion of your army or that model's output. Finally, the Zealot gives +1 attack and +1 strength when charging. This is an awesome trait for close combat focused models, and you can either build them for durability or output. So again, really good choices throughout the tree here. And so if you're playing a close combat minded kill team, I would expect this to probably be like your first or second choice in a specialist. So really something that you're going to see a lot of, I think, in kill teams. So it seems like there are a few traits that are just auto-include, a few that are going to be situational based on what types of weapons you're taking, and then a few that are a little bit more questionable or dependent on if you're playing a campaign or not. But pretty happy with how these specialists work out. I think it gives you a nice way to kind of tweak your different kill team members and give you the best chances of performing at your highest ability in a given game. Regardless of what you're planning on playing, if you're playing pickup games or campaigns or whatever you're planning on bringing in your kill team, I'd love to hear what you think about these specialist roles in the comments below. All right, now that we know what the different specialists do, let's talk about the Tau Empire kill team roster specifically. So starting with strike teams, they can take on the leader role, the communications role, the medic, scout, sniper, or veteran roles. And for the most part, I think all of those are pretty good choices with the exception of the sniper role. I don't see strike teams as being particularly good snipers just because, you know, they're not going to be, you know, delivering those heavy hits that you really want that sniper benefit for. You know, I would rather use that sniper role for something else. So it's not necessarily that strike teams are bad snipers, but there are definitely better units that you'd want to fill the sniper role. Breacher teams basically have the same setup, except for instead of being snipers, they can be demolitionists. I think this actually works out fairly well for them. So they can be leaders, communications, medics, scouts, demolitionists, or veterans. And of those, I think scouts, demolitionists, and veterans are probably the ones that you'd want to have on breachers. Those first three specializations, those are things that are going to require breachers to be close by other units. And if you're doing a bunch of breachers, that probably works out great. But if you're doing kind of a combined arms list with a few breachers, a few strike teams, a few stealth, whatever, you're going to have a hard time getting your breacher to be where those other guys are, where you really want to use those benefits. So, for example, the leader benefit, you're probably going to want to use that on a rail rifle or something. And so having your breacher be somewhere else that's far away from your Pathfinder isn't really going to work. So again, if you're doing a breacher heavy list, it probably works out fine, but if you're doing something mixed, you're going to have a hard time getting those support characters, if they're breachers, to be next to the guys you want them supporting. Pathfinders can be leaders, snipers, demolitionists, or communication specialists, and that's an okay set. I think leaders are probably not a great choice for Pathfinders just because Pathfinders are so wimpy, right? They're easy to kill, and so you don't want your leader being taken out early on because he doesn't have good enough armor. So I wouldn't invest in a leader Pathfinder. I'd put that somewhere else, something like a stealth suit, for example, or at least on a strike team member where they have a little bit more protection. On a Pathfinder, they're kind of waiting to just die. So I wouldn't do that, but the other three options seem pretty darn good. Sniper in particular, if you're taking a specialist weapon like iron rifle or a rail rifle, either of those are going to be really good options for a sniper specialist. Stealth suits are kind of a jack of all trade option here. They can be leaders, communication specialists, heavy specialists, scouts, or veterans. And basically all of those are going to work really well with the stealth suit loadout. You know, either taking a burst cannon or a fusion blaster, things are going to work out well. This is the only place that we have access to the heavy roll, which is too bad. I really think breachers would benefit from the heavy roll since it allows them to advance and ignore the penalty to advance. So particularly for breachers, if we were advancing with the pulse blaster and then able to fire without a -1 to hit, that would be really useful for them. But it's also very useful for stealth suits, so I'm glad that they get it at least, and I can see that being a really nice use of a fusion blaster, for example. So put the fusion blaster on a stealth suit, make him a heavy specialist, and he's going to be able to really do some damage to you know, specific targets early on in the game because of his elevated mobility. So overall, I think there are some pretty clear roles for each of the different units here. Of course, drones don't get to be specialists, so I didn't talk about them, but all of these 4 infantry models, I think, pretty clear roles, and I'm excited to see how they play in an actual game of Kill Team. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, this video was made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you also enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there. Special thanks to Max Harrison, NoExcusesPanda, Nick Steele, TauOswell, Paul Lueders, Jared Egeler, Brian Mann, Jake Johnson, Eric Jackson, Youhei Penguin, Peter Benjamin Parker, RP, Christian Gustavsen, Andy M. Young, Julian Peck, Giovanni DiMaggio, and Cristofer Sarale.